In this video, I'm going to discuss styling PrimeNG tooltips. Tooltips is very helpful when you need to give some feedback and some additional information about a button on your screen. And I've got a couple tooltips on the debug and on the changing light mode and dark mode. So you notice I have a bit of a delay on these. You notice the font is a little bit smaller than the default with tooltips, and I'll show you how I styled those. Let's begin with the actual styling of the tooltip. Now, if you'll notice in my public, which is new with Angular 18, I believe. If you're just using Angular 18, a brand new project, and you're just starting out, you'll have a public. It's where you put your assets, or at least that's where I'm putting my assets. You can still leave your assets down in the source, but I put mine up here, which is where you keep all your static files that aren't going to change. They're not your application files, but your static files, like your images and your fonts. I also have moved my styles there, my CSS. In here, you'll notice I have a base, and this base, what it does is it's forwarding all of the others, and then in here in the source there will be a styles. This is all using SCSS, and in here I'm saying use base, and then I have the old style of import to get the PrimeNG modules in. So here's my base, and here's my PrimeNG icons, not modules, but icons. Let's go back and look at our tooltip SAS file. In here, I've got pTooltip, which is your root class for the tooltip, and I found that by going into PrimeNG. And in PrimeNG, in their tooltip style TS, so I'm down in the packages for PrimeNG, and I went to the source, and then I went down to tooltip, and I looked at this right here. Now this is also styling. In here, this is the tooltip. Okay, let me back that one up. So the styling is taken care of in here, and they have a theme. It's an interesting way they're pulling this in. Instead of in a SAS file or a CSS, they actually have it in a theme file, and they're using this TD pointer to get to the styles. And this is documented in the PrimeNG styling in page. So in here we see tooltip, and they've got, these are the basic setup. This is coming out of your theme file that you've loaded. And let's go back and let's look at our application now. So based on that information from PrimeNG source, I know that this is the class I want to set up. Now the font size is pretty big. If I don't have this in here, let me show you the size of the font. So let's save that, and let's shift back to the web. Over on the web, if we go here, you can see how large this is. If I go this one, it just gets much larger. It takes up a lot more space. Now let's go back to the code and turn that back on. Save that. Let's go back to the web, and you'll see that it's much smaller now. So you can control that by handling it in the code here, in your styles. Now let's talk about using a template with the tooltip. So here's the template. Now I'm used to the old way of doing it where you have ng template and then you say p template equals. PrimeNG got away from that and now they're just using it like this, and that's very important. If you do the p template, if you're used to the old way of doing it, it's not going to work. So you're going to have to do it this way alone. Now the important thing here is notice this. So in your P tooltip, which is a directive, it says tooltip content, which is this guy here. I don't see anything else here. I had to turn on something else. I'll show that to you in just a moment here. But then in here, or they have their tooltip, they're doing a flex container center, item center, and they have SVG. So if I go over this, you'll see the SVG, their logo, and it's got the theme color that's chosen here. So if I change that, you'll see that it changes even in here. Okay, let's change it again. Yep, so that changes whenever you change your theme color up there. So that is how the template is done there. If you go back up, go to the API and go down in here, this content. So the content in the case of a directive, it is, you don't need that field. It's done right in this piece here. So this by default is content. Let's go back to the API. So content is where that comes from. So you can either have a string or you can have a template reference. And in this case here, we're going to use a template reference. I've done, in my code, I'm doing it both ways, and we'll get into that. And then a couple other things that I'm using. Show delay. How many times would you like to, how many times have you had cases where you don't want your tooltip to show immediately? You want a bit of a delay in there. So this is in milliseconds. So you put 1000 in there, and it's basically 1 second. So they have to sit there for a while, and it'll then display. And then the escape boolean, the tool renders as text set default false to support HTML tags in the content. So this I've done, let's see, I've done this in, yes. So default is true. I'm going to set it to false. So let me show you the code. So over in the code, here's that escape equals false. Here's the show delay of 1 second. And the tool position is left. The other thing to note is it's not wide enough, so I put 400 pixels. Notice I had to put the important here, the exclamation point, or bang as some people refer to it, and then important. This ensures that it is done. I do not have to do ng root here because this is pulled into the styles SAS. I have another video on how to get around the ng root, and that's one that talks about that. So what we've got here now is this one is using the template. Notice in here, now this has got the square brackets. It's important. I have square brackets around it, and to debug, it points to that one. Down here, square brackets, to normal mode, points down here. Notice I'm using regular HTML tags here to make that italic and this, the rest of it not. Down here, I did it all inline. And notice I did the escape. Now I'll show you the difference between escape true and escape false. So let's go ahead and look at the web. So in the web here you can see that the click icon is italic and the switch to debug mode is normal. The same thing is going to go for here. Now the difference is this one is in a template. Both the switch to debug and switch to normal mode. I saw that I didn't have that set correctly. So let's fix that. No, it's supposed to say. Oh yeah. Okay. So back over in the code here. It says normal mode now. Let's go back, let's save this, go back to the web. It should say back to normal mode and debug mode. Okay, so that's corrected now. So this is out of a template. Let's go back and look at the code. So you can see the template here. Now the escape, notice that there's, if I set this to true and I save that, this is when you're in normal mode and you want to switch back to, or when you want to switch back, you're in debug mode here and you want to switch back to normal mode. Let's go back to the code and let's see what this does. Okay, it doesn't seem to have done anything. Let's see, escape true. Let's take that out, see what that does. Let's go back to the browser. Okay, so that doesn't seem to do anything. So I learned something just then. So what that means is the instructions where it said that you need to do that escape doesn't appear to work when you're using that. So let's take that out of there. We don't need it. Save that. Let's double check it. So that works fine. I don't get any HTML characters in there. This one now is not using the template. Let's see what happens with that. Let's go back down here and let's set this to true. True is the default. In fact, I'm going to set both of them to true. Let's go back to the web and let's look at this now. All right, so what this means is the escape is only when you have it inline in the tooltip content. When you're using this type of thing with the template, when you're using a template, you don't need to use the escape. So that's interesting. I just learned something on that. Now you could probably do that if you did the backslash to escape it. I'm not sure. But doing it this way, they show. Let's go back and look at the web. So in the Angular, on the escape, so here's escape. So by default, the tooltip contents are rendered as text, set to false to support HTML tags in the content. That's what I missed. In the content. It's not what's in the template ref. So down here you see content. When you're doing it as a let's go back to the code. When you're doing it this way, this is a directive. So directive is how we're using this. I used to be able to do a tooltip alone. I haven't tried that yet to see if you can do it alone without something else like this. But it appears that you have to have it in a, let's go back to the web. Let's see if you can do it. Let's go to the features. Tooltip directive. It doesn't look like you can do it outside of a directive, so you have to use it as a directive now. All right. So the tooltip position, one thing I noticed is that when you're, so I have the tooltip to the left here. Let me show you what happens if I put it to the bottom. Let's go back to the code and let's go up to set both of them to bottom. I'm going to save that. Let's go back to the web. And now let's look at, it's got a problem there. It's supposed to be at the bottom. See where this one shows. This one's at the bottom. But why is the other one showing on the right? I don't know. And it's, you can't read that. Click icon. I can kind of read it. To switch to normal mode. So there's something going on. Let's look back at the code here. There's nothing different between these. Let's see what top does. Save that. We're just doing the one, which is, let's go back to the web. This one here should be at the top. This one will still be at the bottom. Now notice how it's wrapping. And notice that the arrow is not under the center, it's over this way. And that's because it has not enough space. So it's pushing it. All right. Let's go back to the code. Set that back to left. And let's set this to left. So one thing you're going to have to play with, your designer may say, oh, I want that at the bottom. But if it doesn't work, you're going to have to go back and show your designer. Many times the designer will say, this is what I want. You must give it to me exactly like this. And it is up to the developer to do that. But when you can't, you need to talk with your designer and they need to make an adjustment to their design. Sometimes a designer thinks, well, you just don't know what you're doing. You should be able to do this. In that case, you tell them, okay, come sit with me and I'll show you. And when you show it to them, they will usually agree with you. So be aware of that and do your best to stay true to what the designer wants. But when you can't do it because of third-party software, in this case, then you're just going to have to show the designer this is the way it works. In Figma or whatever they're using, if it is working correctly, then it's not working correctly here. So they'll have to understand that, and most designers will work with you. I've not really met a designer that wouldn't work with me on an issue. So let's review real quick. I've got, and I will be putting this in GitHub, the style PrimeNG tooltip is the branch that this is on, and I'll merge that into the main branch, but I will be putting it in there. And so roadblock header component, this is the component at the top. I have my header options, that's the div section. So the header options go over this side, the menus here, and the header text or the logo goes up here. This would be your company logo or company brand that goes up in this corner here. All right, so we're gonna go over now to the tooltip, and all I did is I have in my SAS, I have a tooltip SAS, and that's down here in the base, and so that's pulled in the base right here, tooltip right there, and so I handle that right here. And I had to do this because 200 is the number of pixels wide by default. I doubled it just because I like to have a little bit wider. And you might have a designer that says, hey, it's got to be wider. Now, that's what we've done so far. Now, if you need to modify the theme, that's where you would go down into your theme. Let's go into themes. And I'm using Cyan Aura theme. And it's toward the bottom here. Here's all your tooltip. This section is everything to do with your tooltip. If you need to, you can modify this, but they recommend that you put extend, and you put it in brackets, and that's not what I want there. So let's say and this is one that I can't, I've tried this. So font size, if I want to do 0.8, let's try it real small just to demonstrate it. 4 rem. Okay. So if I save that, let's go back to the web. It's not changing it. So if I go back to my code now and I go into my tooltip and let's comment, well, let's comment that out. Okay. Save that. Let's go back to the web. You'll see that it's gone back to normal mode. So if I go back in here in the theme, let's change that to 4 rem. Let's make it huge. I do things in extreme because otherwise if it's real subtle you may not notice it. Let's back to the code here. Sorry about that. So I'm going to make it 4 rem. Let's save that. Let's go back to the browser. And it doesn't really change it. Let's go back to the code. Take that out. It's not helping me any. But if you need to change padding, let's say you're padding here. So this is 0.5 rem and 0.75 rem. Let's say you want to change this to no padding. Let's just take that out and let's see what happens. If we go back to the web, you can see it doesn't appear to have done anything. Let's refresh. So padding doesn't seem to have been affected by that. This is where you want to play with it and figure things out. Let's go back to the code. And I don't see anything else. I'm not sure what gutter is, but here's your 12.5 rem. My tool, so that's 12.5. Let's change this to 24. You know what? Let's get rid of this. And let's do it down in here. Max width. A 24, 25. 25 rem. Comment that one out. And let's see what that does. Let's go back to the web. Let's see if we have, yes, we have our width. Allows us to do that. Let's see how wide that's going to allow us to go. I'm going to go back here in the code to a second line here. And I'm just going to add that to it just to show you that it can be done. And this is the debug. Let's go back. I was showing the browser, sorry about that. I'm trying to get better on showing code and browser. Sometimes I forget. So here we've got the additional, I put a break in there, and you should see this show up on another line below this. And this should be longer. This may wrap, we'll find out. So I save that. Let's go back to the web and let's see what we've got here. Yes, it does wrap. So we are exceeding the amount and it's going at the bottom. That's interesting, even though I told it to go left. So there appears to be something, there's a bug or something in there. There's got to be, because I'm telling it position left. Let's go back to the code. Let's take out position. This is where you want to play with things and see what it does. So go back to the web. So I took out position altogether, and yeah, it puts it down there. Notice the arrow is way over here when I'm hovering there. So it goes at you still get your tooltip, but there's a bug in there. Let's restore. Let's go back to the code here. Let's restore that back to left. And let's just shorten this just to see what happens. Let's go back to the web. And now it is coming up there. So it has something to do with the wrap. When there's a wrap, it will do that. So let's go back to the code. Let's try something else here. Let's go back to what we had and let's put a break in here. Save that. Let's go back to the web. So it's not necessarily the break, And notice how it's wrapping stuff that it didn't. So icon or click icon to switch to debug mode. That wasn't wrapped when it was on the left-hand side. But now that it's pushed down, there is a bug in there. And hopefully they fix it. Let's go back to the code again. So in the code, we see how we can manipulate things even when there's a bug. So just to let you know, it's kind of hard to debug a tooltip. Let me explain. Let's go in here and let's inspect. What you would normally do is you want to go to here and you want to click hover. It doesn't make the tooltip appear. And it may be because of the delay. I don't know. Let's take the delay off. Do it for both of those just in case. So now when you go here, it immediately shows. I'm going to inspect this. Yeah, so doesn't appear to be the delay. Let me show you how difficult it is to debug a tooltip. If anyone has any suggestions, please put it in the comments, because this is something I would like to know better and how to debug this. So when I hover, it comes up here. If I do an inspect, okay, if I do an inspect, and I should be able to go to here, this is in my inspection thing, I should be able to turn that on and it should be able to show a hover, but it's not doing it. And unless I can get that hover to show, I won't see why, I won't see the HTML that's actually making this box display. And this is something that I would like to know how to do better. I'm sure many of you would like to know that as well. If anyone out there knows how to do that, please add a comment and explain how you would debug a hover, or not a hover, but this tooltip. So the other thing I would look for is, let's see what happens here. Event listeners. Blur has to do with focus, got focus, lost focus, and then there's focus here. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in there. Go to properties, accessibility. Sometimes they'll work with accessibility. They'll set something or clear something. So that's something I would really like to understand. So please, somebody, if you understand how to do this, post it in the comments. I hope this video has helped you. Please like and subscribe, and we will continue to make more videos. Thank you.